Good morning, God bless you all. So we're in Romans chapter 12 today, and we're looking at the first two verses. I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is the good and acceptable and perfect will of God. If you look on the group here, you will see two photos. The first one is an old photo off the internet of some traveling people, gypsy people, mainly women and children, and they've got some wagons in the background, and they're outside and they're sat around an old fire. And maybe some of the older women in the group might remember these kind of days. They might remember what it was like, doing your washing and your cooking outside. You might remember what it was like begging, for water. You might remember what it was like working on the fields with your hands. You might remember what it was like raising children in a wagon or outside. And then think about how it is today. Think about the modern technology that we have today. Think about how we live today, the comforts that we have today. Think about how far we have come from where we was. There are a lot more people educated today. There are a lot more people running legitimate businesses today. Back then, people robbed, they stealed, they worked the fields, they did whatever they could just to get by each day. It wasn't about having brand new clothing or a brand new home or designer bags. It was about feeding the family and getting through each day. And look at where we are today. Today is about booking the next big holiday. Today it's about getting the next designer bag or getting the next new car or the next new home. Today it's all about looks and what we can have in this life in comfort. Not many today, not many are struggling to get through each day. Most of us are planning for the future and planning holidays and birthdays, that spending the type of money and having the luxuries and the things that people 50 years ago wouldn't even dreamed of. But look at ourselves today and think back to the gypsy people, to your grandfathers and your grandmothers, and think back, would they recognize us today? Would they recognize us as gypsy people today? Not just because of the way that we've changed in the way that we live, not just because that we're now richer than we've ever been, not just because of the modern technology and the comforts that we have, but because of the way that we speak to one another, because of the way that we act around one another, because of the way that we live today, the attitude that we have today. I'm not that old, but I remember a time when we would stop on bits of grounds and my father would, you know, go out and earn a living, do whatever he was doing to earn a living. But I remember all the boys and the girls, they'd be outside, they would be playing. And I remember a time if I was cheeky to a man on the ground, that man would give me a slap around the head, whoever he was. And if I went back and told my father that some man's give me a kick up the backside or a slap around the back of the head, he would automatically say to me, "What have you done?" He wouldn't think that the man's done something wrong. He would think that I've done something wrong. What would happen today if we did that? What would happen today if a child come being cheeky to you and you give it a kick up the backside? You know what would happen. It would be war. Think about how when you didn't have any butter, you didn't have any milk, you didn't have any sugar, you didn't have any bread, and you wanted to make a bit of something, you would send the children around. I remember being sent around by my mother. Go and see if so and so's got any milk, or go and see if so and so's got any bread, or just go around the ground and see if anybody's got any bread. Or we would just go and ask, and people would just share what they had. Our children today would die if we asked them to do that. they would be lodged to death. Would we recognize ourselves today from 50 years ago, 60 years ago? Would the gypsies recognize us today? And one of the reasons that we've gone this way, one of the reasons why we have, changed so much, almost to a point where we're not recognizable, is because of the second photograph that I've put on. The old way and the new way. Or you're old-fashioned is the answer now. You're old-fashioned. You just got the old ways about you. People ain't like that no more. It's the modern way. It's the new way. Well, maybe it is, but the new way isn't always the good way. The new way isn't always the right way. And speaking as Christians, that needs to be our mindset too. Just because it's a new way of doing things doesn't make it right. Just because all the young girls dress a certain way today doesn't mean as Christians we should dress that way. It doesn't mean because everyone puts everything that they do on Facebook and everyone is arguing and debating on Facebook and everyone is doing this on Facebook and the social medias. It doesn't mean that we should. What we've done as Christians, as a church, we have done this. We have been conformed by the world. We have allowed the world around us to change us. Just like traveling people and gypsy people who have been changed by the world around them, so as Christians, we have been changed by the world around us. The Apostle Paul here, the Word of God says, do not be transformed by the world, but be transformed by the Word of God, by the renewing of our minds. We need to go back to the old way as Christians. We need to go back to the old way of thinking as Christian men and women. We need to go back to a lifestyle of modesty. We need to go back to a lifestyle where we dress not for the fashion of today to get likes and ticks on Facebook and everyone to say, oh, don't you look lovely? Oh, don't you look nice? Or don't you look well for your age? We shouldn't be looking for that today as Christians. We need to go back to an old way of thinking where people look and say, a modest dressed woman. Where people look and say, a humble man, a humble family, a godly man or a woman. Where they're looking at Christ in us and not looking at the clothes and the accessories and the homes and the cars that we drive. They're looking at Christ in us and not the world. Would we as Christians today, and I know that on this group, and I know that people who listen to this message will remember that when the gospel first started getting spread all around us. I remember in the 80s when people was coming to faith. And I remember when preachers were just rough and ready men who knew very little about the Word of God, but they had a passion and desire to serve God. Yes, we got many things wrong. Yes, we was uneducated. Yes, we didn't really know a lot about the Bible. But we knew what it was to walk with God. We knew what it was to strive every day with Christ, to live a humble life, to live a sacrifice life, to live for Christ every single day. We knew what that was compared to today. Look how we dress today. Look how we go on today. Look how the church is today. There's no reverence in the church of God today. There's no respect for the preacher when he preaches. People are eating and drinking all around them, having conversations while the man at the front is preaching his heart out. We're sitting in church where we're supposed to be in a time of worship, in a time of prayer, in a time of seeking God, and we're watching things on our phones. We're talking to one another about something, where we're going for food, or have you booked a holiday? We have allowed the world to conform us, to transform our minds. We need to go back to the old way. We need to go back to the old way. What is the old way? This is the old way. It's very, very simple. Very simple. Psalms 119, 105 says this. Your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path. That's the old way. Getting back to the Word of God, to show us how to live, how to act, and how to be as a Christian in this sinful, fallen world that we live, and not to allow the world to transform us into the world. Brothers, sisters, whoever's listening to this message this morning, let us go back to the old principles of serving God daily, of having a reverence for Him in the house of God. Let us raise our children and our grandchildren. Grandparents, listen, you have a right as grandparents to put your grandchildren in check in church, to tell them to shut up and sit down and be quiet. You have a right to say to your grandchildren, that isn't right. If you're confessing to be a Christian, you shouldn't dress like that. You shouldn't talk like that. You shouldn't have that attitude. You shouldn't act that way. One of the men who was so influential in my upbringing as a Christian was my grandfather, because he wouldn't hold back in telling me what was right and wrong. And I thank God for it. So grandparents and parents this morning, let's get back to the old principle ways of the Word of God. Let's not allow the world to dictate and change our minds in thinking this is how it is now. No, we are to be separate. We are to offer our bodies as sacrifices to God. That includes the way that we dress and the way that we act. And we are to give everything over to the Lord, and to be humble and holy, to be reverent in church and out of church. We're to get back to the Word of God to show us how to be as a Christian, and not look at the world and let the world tell us how we should be as a Christian. But we need to get back to the Word of God. That's what we need to get back to. Be transformed today by the Word of God, and not by the influence of this world that we live in. God bless you all.